Retire.
No, that would be the day I probably just jump out the back of your truck. Plus, you wouldn't want to waste all that gas driving to the beach to pick me up.
Oh, you live on the beach? I thought you lived in town.
Nah, I live on the beach. Okay, so any specific questions before I just pick a couple of problems from the homework to do?
The one that I sent you and you never responded to?
I was in the middle of
PreCalc.
teaching. Shut it.
I don't
Yeah,
care.
You're
PreCalc.
I
not the
need
only class I have, and because you multiplied in by 3, where did your 7 and 28 go? They just disappeared.
Yeah, because I did the math in my head.
Well, you did the math wrong. Do it by hand.
Okay. Wait.
But no, when you multiply n by the 3 goes away as your denominator, but then you have a 7 and a 28. What do 7 and 28 have in common?
4. No. Oh my god, I'm dumb. 7.
There you go. That's where the 7 would come from. You pull the 7 out that they have in common, sweetie.
Okay.
But yes, I'm
Thanks.
teaching. I start teaching at 9 o'clock, so if I don't respond to you between 9 and your class, it's because I'm teaching a different class.
Okay.
Um, oh, hey, Jack's finally coming to class.
Yeah, I sent him the link.
You mean like I sent him 3 times?
Well, I don't think he got that.
Does he not get my reminds?
I have no idea.
Oh, we'll see. No big deal. All right. So any specific questions from the homework problems that anybody wants me to do? No? Okay. So we'll start off with an easy one. I'll just do number 12 first. So y minus 3 squares equals negative 8x plus 1. So here they want you to identify the vertex, let's see, what is it all doing? So the vertex, the focus, the directrix, the x and y intercepts, and then graph it. So do the first one. That's always the easiest one first, the center of the vertex. So what is the vertex of that parabola?
-1, 3.
Very good. So don't forget and make the mistake that x always goes first still. So our vertex is -1, 3. All right, what about the focus? Okay, how do we?
Wouldn't it be right to the vertex right now?
Okay, how did you get right to?
Because the vertex, I mean the focus is P right from this.
Okay, so first thing you mentioned, we had to solve for our p-value. So p is equal to -2. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves, because you're on the right track, but where is the focus?
Inside the parabola.
And which way does this parabola open?
Doesn't it open left, or am I just dumb?
No, you're right. It opens left. So as a quick sketch to have an idea of what's going on, -1, 3. So there's our vertex. So it's going to look something.
I have no idea why I said right. I
You're
meant
okay.
left.
You're good, buddy. So without drawing an actual graph, I think of that sketch on the right there in my head. This is what my parabola looks like. And as Harrison correctly pointed out, our focus is inside of our parabola. So it's going to be to the left, and we use this p-value to do so. So our focus will be left 2. So it'll be -1 minus 2, comma 3, which is -3. 3.
Left.
It will be left in this case because the parabola opens left, and our focus is always inside of our parabola. Okay. What about our directrix? Somebody else.
Wouldn't it be x equals -1?
Why would it be x equals -1?
Because the p, you just go that way, right? Too?
Go which way?
Right.
Okay. So where do I start?
The vertex.
And if I go right 2, where will I be at, Brisa?
Oh, shoot. Wait. 1.
So not
X equals
-1.
1.
There you go. Someone besides Brisa explain to us why is it x equals 1.
It's a vertical line.
So our directrix is a vertical line. Very good. So that's why it has to be x equals. Okay, they also want our x and y intercepts. So this goes back to graphing pretty much anything. How do we find x intercepts? Okay, different question. What is an x-intercept?
When y equals 0.
Very good. So we can't remember or can't forget that an x-intercept is when the y value is 0. So for an x-intercept, we set our y equal to 0. And we get 0 minus 3 squared equals -8 x plus 1. So we get 9 equals -8 x plus 1 divided by -8. And then we'll minus 1, so negative. So -17/8 equals x. Okay, however, we are not done with that x-intercept. Can someone explain why that is not sufficient to answer the question?
Because you have to have a y coordinate, right?
Correct. We can't forget the x-intercept and y-intercept are points, so we need to write them out as a point. So it is -17/8, comma 0 is our x-intercept, and there is only one, which if you look at the shape of our parabola, that makes sense. So then how do we find a y-intercept? Very good, Miss Abby. You set your x equal to 0. So same idea. So we get y minus 3 squared is equal to -8. 0 plus 1. So y minus 3 squared equals -8. Take the square root of both sides because we need to get rid of that. And now somebody find the mistake I made on purpose.
No plus or minus?
Very good. Was not the answer I was expecting. So do not forget, when you take the square root, you have to include the plus or minus. But now, what does that lead us to an answer? What's the square root of -8?
What?
What is the square root of -8?
Isn't it imaginary?
Very good. It is imaginary. We are not graphing imaginary things. We are graphing real numbers. So that means there is no y-intercepts.
This is probably dumb, but wouldn't you just, instead of having plus and minus, wouldn't you just, if you made it
I'm
negative,
confused. How is there no y-intercept?
Hold on, let Madeline finish
Wait.
her question.
Never mind.
if you made it like instead of plus or minus, it was just minus, then it would be -1 times the square root of -8. So that would be like -2i or something like that.
Right.
And then, but you'd multiply that times -1. Oh, so it would still be imaginary. It would just be positive.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Madison, did you figure out your question?
Yeah, I'm an idiot. Never mind, ignore me.
Okay. And Miss Olivia, the negative 4p equals negative 8 comes from the original equation. If you look at the basic form of our parabola, it is the y minus k squared equals 4p x minus h. So that's where the 4p equals negative 8 comes from. Okay. So at that point, we're pretty much ready to graph everything. You just put all this stuff on your things. You also could have realized that there was no y-intercepts when you know that your vertex is at, negative 1, 3, and it opens left. Maddie, your mic's open. You're okay. So there's a couple different ways you could have realized there was no y-intercepts. Because it starts there and opens left, et cetera, et cetera. At any point, she probably would like to see some work as far as this goes to show that there's no y-intercepts, or at least an explanation of to why there's no y-intercepts. So now you can actually graph this accordingly. So the only thing we really need to put on there, you probably want to graph a couple of points, not just a sketch. So do like an XY chart of a couple points. But we should have, so this point here would be like negative 17 over 8 right there. Things like that. But then just do an XY chart, put a couple points on the graph for. It doesn't have to be some super amazing thing. But to me, that would be more than enough. But other teachers want more. So just be careful. Make sure you have enough points on your graph. Okay. Any questions on anything on that problem? All right, and then somebody pick a number 15 through 20, and we'll do that one. And we'll call it a day. Don't all pick your favorite number at once.
18.
18 it is. Okay, let's see, what is 18? Okay, so y squared minus 4y. Plus 12x. That's right, I think that was the problem. Plus 12x. Yes, okay. All right, so before we even start this, how do we know this is the graph of a parabola?
Has one variable squared and one not.
Correct. So we can't forget that conversation from yesterday. Since y is squared and x is not, we know we have a parabola, not a hyperbola or an ellipse or anything like that, or a circle. So we need to get all of our y's on one side, all of our x's on the other side. So we have, leave the y squared where it's at, in my opinion. Oop, no, minus. Plus blank equals negative 12x plus 20. Hey, Dad. Okay. Now we need to go ahead and complete our square on the left with the y to get that into a factored form. So, reminder, cut that in half, square it, plus 4, plus 4. Don't forget to add it to both sides. Now left should factor pretty easy for us because we've been doing quite a few of these. So we get y minus 2 squared. This will be negative 12x plus 24. So I'm going to factor out a negative 12, giving me x minus 2. And we now have an equation in standard form.
So you always have to have the x be positive. You couldn't just factor out 12, and then it would be negative x plus 2.
Correct, because remember, we have to match the form of our parabola.
Okay.
So that's the y minus, in this case, y minus k squared is equal to 4p x minus h. So it has to match that form there where the x and y's are both positive. One of them is squared, in this case the y, so I don't need the other form. And the other one is not squared. Somebody said, how'd I? And then cut out. Okay. At that point, the problem is the exact same as what we just did. They want us to find pretty much all the same thing. I guess we didn't talk about that because I didn't know that was going to be on there, but whatever. We'll talk about it in a second. So just kind of list the things out since we already did the work on the last one. The vertex will be at 2, 2. You get the 4p is equal to negative 12, so p is equal to negative 3. Focus. Directrix. So focus, this will open left, so it'll be left. So it'll be at negative 1, 2. And
Okay, can you
again,
explain
vertical
again
5.
why it opens to the left?
Because p is negative.
Okay.
So y squared tells you it's a horizontal, so it either opens left or right. The fact that p is negative tells me it's a left. If p would have been positive, it would have been right.
And it's like on this, like it's not vertical, it's horizontal because the y is squared, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Can you explain the focus real quick?
The
How
focus,
you
since
how you got that?
okay, so since the focus, since it opens left, the focus has to be inside my parabola. So the focus has to be to the left of my vertex. So I went left 3.
Oh, P. Yes. Okay.
Yep. And then directrix is to the right, so I went to the right 3. And then we graph it just like we did. So negative 1, 2.
Wait, how do I find the focus? I'm confused.
The focus, since this parabola opens left, somebody's adding 0. I don't know who. So since it opens left, my focus has to be to the left of my vertex. So I went left 3.
Oh, okay. So wait, so your focus and your P are the same thing then?
No,
Well, not the same thing, but like you use it to find the focus?
correct. Your focus and your
Okay.
directrix use P.
Okay, cool.
And then, so we know it's going to open like this. Our focus is at, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong side. I was reading the focus. So you get 2, 2, which is right there, negative 1, 2, which is like right there.
Wait, wouldn't 2, 2 be on the other side? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't paying attention. So that's a general sketch of your parabola. Obviously, you can find the x and y intercepts. They didn't ask for it in this case. We're just sketching the parabola, so that's perfectly fine. Okay. Any questions on that before I have one new thing to add that I didn't realize that they didn't hear, so it was in a later part. Okay, so any questions on that right there? Okay. The last thing is what's called the lattice rectum, which we'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow because I gotta get ready to leave. But remember this 4p value? It comes into play right there. So if we go on opposite sides of our vertex on our parabola, that is a distance of 4p. That is called our lattice rectum. I'll continue to talk about that tomorrow since I gotta go a little bit early for my dad. And the directrix is 5, Miss Olivia, because it's to the right of our vertex since it opens left. So I moved right 3 values from my vertex.